All right. Hey, Maggie. Hey, so excited to
Hello.
connect with you today, girl. It's been a hot minute and excited to talk to our audiences today about some really, really awesome and amazing topics. So first and foremost, we're hitting it off a little bit on our introduction and like how we first came to be friends. And you were telling me like you reached out just from searching on Google, holistic nutritionist, and here we are today. Like we just made this connection.
Yes, well, it was so important. I felt like when building my practice to have a great relationship with a dietitian such as yourself, because the food that we eat is so important to not only our systemic health, but also our oral health. So having someone to partner with, that's why I reached out to you, is I want to provide my patients with a trusted and exceptional source of information and coaching that you provide.
Yeah, and whoever doesn't know Maggie, her business is Root Dental, so she is the head dentist there. And how big is your team now at this point?
There's six of us.
Six.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so
Went
how did you
from
even
three to six
become,
in a couple months.
yeah, how did you even like start to land in the field of dentistry and like your passion behind it? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it started with a human physiology class my senior year of high school, and I just kind of fell in love with the complexity of the human body and how to improve it and make it tick, and found that I didn't necessarily want to go into like the primary medical care field because in some circles it's very pharmaceutical driven, which is just not my style. Dentistry is very manual and artistic, and that's kind of how I fell in love with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you had several different offices that you worked for previously. How and
Mhm.
when? Because Root Dental is a newer office space that you guys just opened
Yeah.
tail end of last year, right?
Yep. So we're about 3.5 months old. I worked in seven other offices before opening my own, so I've seen a very wide variety of dentistry.
That's awesome. And so far, you guys are in Algonquin and you've
Mhm.
seen lots of patients by this point. Kids,
Yeah.
all age ranges, right? Your specialty,
Yes.
all okay, awesome. And just like you too, my passion for nutrition and even just like the health and wellness field really also stemmed in high school. It was like I knew
Yeah.
my own gut issues that I had as a kid. I started exercising in sixth grade. No one in my family was doing strength training, and I'm like, I'm gonna start lifting weights and doing ab exercise every
I
day.
love it.
I'm like, oh, I felt so much better. I could just feel how
Yeah.
how much of a difference it made in my life. And then
Hmm.
from that point, it was just like this branch off of, okay, now I get exercise, and now I want to also do this with nutrition. And I started shadowing dentists or not dentists, shadowing dietitians at age 15, 16, and then was
Hmm.
like, yes, this is my jam. I want to create like this marriage between personal training and nutrition so that I can really like have the best of both worlds and supporting people from both angles. And then really starting my own business in 2020 when everything happened in the world, right? And shifted from being furloughed at my last job. So I love it. I love it that we have these paths, right? That we have figured out what we're passionate about, and it really propels the quality of care. I feel like that we share this aligned vision where we know that there's such a strong correlation between the brain and the gut
Hmm.
and the oral cat, the mouth and the gut, and how it all connects to create a healthier and optimal lifestyle for each person that we work with. And in our first conversation, it was like you could tell we just like had so much alignment and our
So
messaging
much.
and the way that we just like approach like our business models. And so it's been just so great to get to know you and just get to know
Likewise.
how you treat your clientele too, and just how you treat every person with just so much compassion and so much passion to what you do, and it really, really shines through. So
Yes. Same to you.
yeah, thanks so much.
Absolutely.
So while we're kind of talking about like the oral microbiome, the gut microbiome, what are some things that you see? Because we can really dive into this topic because it is a really important one. But like, what are some of the things that you see when someone has, like, if they come to you, and I know we've got our crazy long questionnaires that we both have people fill out, but like, of course, the intensity of that is that we're trying to make sure we're very thorough in what we're doing.
Yes.
But what are some of the things that you might see in those initial forms or in those initial consultations where you see a lot of poor oral hygiene or poor infection or other disease in the mouth, and then how you see that tied in with maybe some of the
Hmm.
nutrition questions that they fill out for you, or some of the things that you note in their lifestyle habits that is very much so related to the oral piece.
There's so much, Ashley. I mean, I think for a long time in kind of the corporate setting, especially, we kind of see oral health as a reflection of brushing, flossing, and, not eating candy. And it's so much more than that. I mean, specifically to the nutrition piece, yes, it's important what we're eating. Having, clean foods, non-processed foods is huge. It's not just candy. There's a lot of other things that are in our mainstream diet that we're consuming that are causing oral health issues. Even if we're, cooking at home, there's more complexity to it than just don't eat candy, that kind of thing. But in addition to that, you know, frequency of eating, how much water we're drinking, it's
Mhm.
multifactorial. So really diving deep into the lifestyle around eating, what we're eating, when we're eating is super, super important. It's not just, I don't eat candy, so why do I have cavities? Well,
Yeah,
there's a lot of reasons. Even a lot of things that we ask include, how are you sleeping? How are you exercising? Because believe it or not, whether or not you're exercising makes an impact on your oral health.
absolutely. And I'm so glad you just made that
Pause
point
one
because,
second, Ashley.
yep.
One second. Okay, continue.
And I'm so glad you just said that because,
Mhm.
even when I was a kid, I barely ate any candy. I definitely did not drink enough water as a kid, but I had all these gut issues. And looking back, I had so many cavities and I would floss my teeth. I would brush my teeth 3 times a day, right? And my dentist at
Yeah,
the time were just telling me, like, keep doing what you're doing. But none of them had ever taken the time to dig deeper, to find out what was actually causing that, to get to the root solution, right?
yeah,
And being able to actually dig into, what was going on with my bacteria, because at that time when those gut issues were taking place or they were at, like, their worst, that's where I was seeing so many cavities. Every time I went to the dentist I had a cavity. So now, like, after I've healed my gut, after I've gone through extensive shift work for my own microbiome, like, I haven't had a cavity since. And it's like, it just goes to show
amazing.
the difference that you do, not only in what you're eating and how you're eating and how you're hydrating and how you're sleeping. Again, as a kid, like, I felt like I never slept. My sleep habits improved. My oral habits improved, or more so my oral hygiene. So it was like, you just see those parallels, are they just go hand in hand, and we cannot just take the body. Like, we have all these different specialties, and I always say this to my clients too, where it's like, you have your gastroenterologist and you have your cardiologist and you have your endocrinologist. Like, this body is not all different systems. It is one unique system that works together
Absolutely.
in conjunction. When one is off, it's going to affect another area in your body. And I also
Mhm.
always say, like, your physical representation has a direct impact on even, like, your internal state. So the way we think, the way
Yeah,
we feel, and how that affects our microbiome and the conversation that happens with our hormones. So yeah, I'm so glad that you said that, because I definitely was that
yeah.
kid where I'm like, I'm doing all this stuff and my dentist told
Yeah,
me,
and it's like, why is it still happening?
yeah,
And that's another thing too, is that I feel like, you know, it's important to personalize care. And I know you do this with your clients because everyone's body needs different things, right? So there's not a one size fits all nutrition plan. There's not a one size fits all dental plan. We have to look at, maybe someone is deficient in vitamins, and that can be a result of higher bacteria causing or cavity causing bacteria in your mouth. So that goes back to the oral microbiome, is everyone's body is different. We need to take the time to do thorough diagnostics and really find a way to treat someone based on what their specific needs and wants are.
yeah, that's beautiful. And same as you, like, with doing a lot of these testing, whenever I do a stool sample collection called
Mhm.
a gut zoomer, I really look at the, not just for the diversity within the GI system, but also what's going on with the mouth. You don't want to forget about the mouth, because there's biofilms that build up in our mouth and
Yes.
our digestive pathway and our small intestine, large intestine. So we need to break those up, because
Hmm.
they can also hinder our ability to get rid of those. It's kind of like, how do you explain biofilms? It's almost like these little cell pockets that have all these other bacteria that are, like, in a film. And so opening that up and then being
Hmm.
able to like get that out of your body is really important. And we cannot forget about our oral piece to it. And so oftentimes I'll have people on different rinses, or, like, also doing a toothpaste that is more on the herbal side, and even like cinnamon and clove and, like, different things that are more natural based, to help support the change or the die off in some of the bacteria that we don't want to be overgrown in those areas as well.
Absolutely. I love it. And I have a question for you. So what are some of like the signs that you see in your clients where they, supposedly have like a healthy diet, but what are some of the signs that there are nutritional deficiencies? What does it look like in your eyes?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of going back to our intensive questionnaire process and being super thorough, it's like I have
Yes.
an MSQ form, so medical symptom questionnaire, that when people, even just before getting on a discovery call with me, I have them fill it out because I want to know what signs and symptoms they're experiencing, ailments that are telling me more of their story. So if they show up with bleeding gums, or they have, even like white or red or discoloration, or they have like a coating on the tongue, I'm thinking yeast overgrowth, I'm thinking bacteria. If they've got the bleeding, I'm thinking of vitamin C, B6, B12. I'm looking at those B vitamins. Um, if they have any ridges on their nails, I'm looking at protein deficiencies. I'm really looking at from the top down, but how can that again lead back to the mouth? Because that again, where people almost forget, like that is the beginning of digestion. That is the first, well,
Yes.
outside of smell
Yeah.
and sight, that's like our first experience with food as our mechanical breakdown. So that area in our mouth needs to have the enzymes. We need to have amylase to break down our carbohydrates.
Yes.
And as we get lower into the digestive pathway, we want to start breaking down those proteins. But if we are deficient in any one of those micronutrients, it's going to make it difficult for our bodies to really function as best as we need
Hmm.
it to. And we're going to see some of those bleeding gums. We're going to see some of that discoloration. We're going to see some of that, even like, what do you call it? We're like receding gum line, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
receding gum line. Um,
Yeah.
so I definitely ask about those things. And then oftentimes I'll do a micronutrient testing. So this is looking at vitamins, minerals, and fatty acids that are not just
Hmm.
extracellular, they are intracellular. So we can actually get a good idea of about a 3 to 4 month status of what certain individuals, like individual data here, right, on their micronutrients. And when we see that they're low, and let's say we have the opportunity to pair a gut zoomer, so the stool sample with the micronutrient panel, we now
Yeah.
have like this powerhouse of data. And it tells us like if we have a lot of leaky gut going on, well, obviously you're going to have a lot of nutritional deficiencies because
Yeah.
you have leakiness going on, meaning like you aren't able to absorb those nutrients to their fullest capacity into
Hmm.
the cells. You are recirculating toxins within your system. Your body isn't absorbing and making energy because your body isn't taking in those nutrients in ways that it can use it to function.
Hmm.
So as far as what I see is like as symptoms that show up on the outside, again, we are a physical representation of what's happening in our internal state, is when we see those things show up, I'm always asking those questions like, how long has this been occurring for you? And did this just start in the last 3 months, or has this been something that's been happening since childhood? Like if you've been having this deficiency go on for so long, it's going to have a compounding interest effect. And then same thing, another thing to mention on that is as far as like all the different diets and specializing or personalizing each person's experience is even like a lot of times when I see people coming to us that are strictly vegetarian or a vegan based diet,
Hmm.
like we see a lot of B vitamin deficiencies and that also shows
Yeah.
in the oral health. Um,
Absolutely.
that's a big one that pops up. So I do ask a little bit of that on our initial just like meet and greet call. Like, what are your typical, what are some of the things that you typically eat? And they just give me like a short overview before we decide to move forward with like the full on coaching. What about you? What are some of the things that you see?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, your camera went away. There we go. Okay.
Sorry. So what are some of the things that
So,
you see kind of in that same line of a question as like the things that you're looking out for in terms of symptomatic and signs and ailments?
yeah, you're absolutely right. So I think a lot of it can lead back to inflammation also. And exactly what you said that you look for with your patients are, do we have bleeding gums? So some signs of nutritional deficiencies can be gum inflammation, gingival bleeding, like bleeding when you brush, widespread cavities. So not necessarily like the one cavity every so often, but if someone comes in with a mouthful of cavities and they're saying, I brush and floss, I eat everything right, what's going on? Well, let's take a look. What are you really eating? Like where are the deficiencies potentially? Another thing that we do in our office is saliva testing. So
Ah,
kind of speaking back to the signs of chronic inflammation and gut inflammation is actually our saliva can show a photo of can show what our gut looks like. So
ah,
with saliva testing, some of the things that can show up in that indicate poor oral health are if there might be inflammation in the gut from like a bacterial infection, if there's a deficiency of fat soluble vitamins, if there's a deficiency of omega 3s and 6s. And, it gives me a broad picture of where some imbalances might be, if there is a heavy environmental toxin overload, even
Mm.
if there's nervous system imbalances, because it's all related, right? But this saliva testing is a really good first step. And, I would say if there is a nutritional imbalance, let's check out Ashley at Move Fully Nourished and see, what she can kind of dig a little bit deeper to see exactly where that imbalance is. But, I think we can we can see a lot in the mouth, a lot in the saliva, and it's just a matter of testing and digging into it.
Yeah.
So
Maggie, tell
yeah,
us a little bit more
absolutely.
about what that testing entails. Like you're doing a saliva swab of the cheek. Is it with every single new patient that you have, or like what's
I
the
mean,
process?
yeah, so this definitely can be a preventative measure for, getting a baseline to help us kind of try to prevent any flare-ups in cavities or gum disease because it shows up in the saliva before it shows up in the toll that it takes in the gums and the teeth. But basically what it is patients just rinse and spit. They rinse with a solution for about 2 minutes, spit in a cup. And then we've run it through a machine that we have in our office, and it gives us 7 biomarkers of oral health. So that includes ammonia levels, cavity-causing bacteria, acidity, how well your mouth buffers acidity, protein, white blood cells, red blood cell count, all in the saliva, because everyone's saliva is different. And when we can break it down and look at, how they're varying, then we get more information. The other thing too that's really telling about this is when we look at trends. So looking at it once is great as a baseline, but what really helps is, do it after 3 months, after 6 months to see if our interventions are working, as opposed to just doing fillings, saying, okay, let's change your diet. Come back in a year, we'll take new x-rays and we'll see if it worked.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
let's see, in a few months if things have changed to try to kind of head off, further work because the best kind of dentistry is no dentistry. And that's what we're here for is to try to prevent, obviously treat the problems that you walk in with, but prevent more problems to kind of get patients off that hamster wheel of dental work.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you said that. It was so beautifully said. Like the best kind of dentist care is no dentist care. It's like, here's
Yeah.
my business, but I'm literally telling you, like, we want to get you to the point where you're not dependent on this and
Yes.
you're not going back for cavity after cavity. I think that testing is incredible. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
They give you instantaneous results. Like you can see it in
Yeah,
a moment.
so the test takes about 5 minutes. I
What?
do like to be very thorough and comb through it. So usually I'll present and discuss with the patient at their next appointment. But it is relatively quick. It's in office. They don't have to go anywhere. All they have to do is swish and spit. So it's pretty low barrier to entry, very conservative treatment, but gives us a lot of good information because we don't want to do band-aid dentistry. We want to prevent further dentistry.
Yeah,
And I
that
think
sounds
I think
incredible.
too, it's also beneficial to say that um, a lot of times when patients do have what they consider a healthy lifestyle, which, they cook at home a lot and they eat, healthy, and there's a broad definition of that.
Hmm.
And they come in, and I've had a lot of patients that have healthy lifestyles and they come in and they've got a mouthful of cavities and gum disease. And it's like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
And understandably so, if you think you're doing everything right, and you might be doing everything in your knowledge for what you should be doing, um, there's so much more to it. And everyone's body responds to nutrition differently, responds to stresses differently, responds to environmental toxins differently.
Yep.
And healthy is a broad term. So we're here to empower our patients, to help them come up with a plan so that, yes, we take care of the problem, but I really want to prevent future problems. Because, like I said, the best dentistry is no dentistry, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. Beautifully said. And kind
Yeah.
of going back to with that testing and testing every 3 months to your point of lifestyle and habit changes and doing things right, but also maintaining those habits and being consistent with those habits because your oral microbiome, your gut microbiome can change within a week. I mean, you can
Yes,
completely change. So you have to do
absolutely.
you have to do your due diligence to be as consistent as possible with making sure you're getting in fermented foods to help build up the microbiome. Making sure
Yes.
that if you travel, like travel, this is a big one I've been seeing lately. Actually, I'll point out two things. Travel, when people come back from travel, it's like, okay, did you pick up a parasite? Or, again, that's so
Hmm.
common. People are like, but it's really common.
Yeah.
Did you pick up a bacterial infection? Did you get, are we experiencing traveler's diarrhea? Are we experiencing food poisoning? Like a lot of times when we're traveling and just in other places and outside of our normal eating, like that can also completely change your microbiome. So it's also being consistent with being able to replenish, being able to repair,
Hmm.
being able to make sure that you are consistently helping to fuel the good bacteria, adding in fibers, adding in polyphenols, colorful fruits and vegetables, like all of these
Yeah.
things that really help to feed in. There's a bacteria called Akkermansia, and the Akkermansia loves red foods. So you eat like red raspberries and you eat like
Hmm.
pomegranates, and it's going to feed and nourish that specific type of bacteria, which
Hmm.
ultimately will help to feed into the ecosystem of your GI tract and the
Yeah.
microbiome itself. So I love what you said about that, frequency and testing and being on top of it, measuring progress. We're all about that too.
Hmm.
It's like tracking progress weekly, tracking the bigger picture every 3 months so we can see, do you have that insight first and foremost to make sure that you know which next steps to take? And are you doing them consistently enough to make an impact that is lasting? And we are ever fleeting, we are ever changing. So to do the things that we
Hmm.
need to manage our stress, to heal past traumas, to look at our relationships as a way to help empower us, and letting go of relationships that are no longer serving us. That's a big one too.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that, because of those stressors having such a big impact on our gut
Hmm.
microbiome and our oral health, is we need to look at that. I feel like that is a big foundation because I'm seeing more and more people that are stressed. And maybe you can kind of touch base on this too, is like if you have the person doing things perfectly, quote unquote, we'll call them like they're exercising consistently, they're sleeping really well, they are eating, protein, vegetable, carb, fats at their meals. They've got a nice balance in there at every meal that they're having, but they are overworked, overstressed, and
Yeah.
constantly on edge, and they have high cortisol or
Hmm.
just norepinephrine, epinephrine, like they're just feeling so out of whack from the hormonal perspective. What are maybe some things that you might see if you correlate this, right? With
Yeah.
that type of response in the body?
Oh, yeah. It's a great question because I've had a lot of patients come to me in that situation, and I will first talk about sleep because that affects sleep, right? And when we are not sleeping well, that's one of the things we screen for also is sleep issues, and they show up in the mouth. If there is stress sleep, if there's tooth grinding, if there's
Uh,
mouth breathing, that can show up because when we're breathing through our mouths, if we're not sleeping well, it encourages that, and then we're drying out the mouth at night, and that can significantly increase your risk for cavities.
mhm,
So that's one thing is poor sleep. You're not healing as well. Your body can't fight off oral infections as well. That's a big thing. I will talk about exercise too, because actually regular exercise decreases your risk of oral infections and cavities because when we're decreasing systemic inflammation, we're
mhm,
decreasing oral inflammation.
mhm.
So it's all connected. Another thing too is, you know, healthy is a very general term, but certain things that are, maybe healthy for some people aren't healthy for other people when it comes to their mouth and cavities and gum disease. So being that goes back to personalized care and learning what your body needs, not what everybody's body needs. That's a big part of it too. But I mean, even talking just about stress alone, for one example, when we're in a high stress, chronic stress,
Mhm.
our sympathetic nervous system is on overdrive. We're in that fight or flight mode frequently. Studies have shown that increases a enzyme in your saliva called alpha amylase, which you mentioned previously.
Mhm.
Now, there's a balance with this. We want it in our saliva. We don't want too much of it because too much of it can be too much of a good thing, and it can, through a long process here that I won't go into detail, but too much of it can increase your risk of cavities, because there's too much breakdown going on. And when we have high cortisol levels, high stress levels chronically, we've got too much of that enzyme in our saliva, and that in turn increases cavities risk. So even if you're eating super clean, homemade diet is great, Um, we're exercising, you know, we're taking great flossing every day, brushing every day, and we're super, super stressed. We're not sleeping. Our body is like all the firefighters are kind of on overload. You
Yep.
can still get cavities.
Yep.
It's not just, well, I floss and I, use clean toothpaste. Like there's just so much more to it than that.
To your point with the amylase uptick and production, and that goes back to also from the sciencey standpoint, like you're craving for carbohydrates. When your amylase goes up, that
Yeah.
is what digests carbohydrates in the mouth. Like that's the first line of digestion. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, that enzyme goes up. Your cravings for carbohydrate goes up because your stress is really high, and then therefore you're eating more sugary foods or more things higher in carbohydrates, and then it's just like
Hmm.
perpetuates the whole cycle. And
Yes.
really interesting to think about that too. So like when people don't sleep well and we see their blood sugar markers going up, like the liver is trying to
Hmm.
make more glucose and that amylase goes up and then that stress response and then insulin kicks off and then we see that inflammation
Yes.
just perpetuate.
And then you see it in the gums because then the gums get inflamed.
Yes,
So,
yes.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, we could do a whole series. We could do a whole mouth gut series on everything that we talked
Seriously.
about.
And
And
I have a question for you
yeah.
too. So, what are some common like mistakes people make in terms of like when they say they're eating healthy? What are some common mistakes or myths that you see?
Yeah, really good question. And I'd ask you the same. When people come to me and they're like, "Oh, I know what to do. I know what to do, and I eat healthy and I do these things." And then we start really digging into it, and
Hmm.
I really start to peel back the layers. Their lifestyle is really not healthy. Like you might be thinking you're doing one thing, but ultimately, I think we've also been fed this uh, fallacy that healthy, like there's all these processed foods that can claim, right, this is organic or this is gluten
Yeah.
free. And then you look at the label and you're like, well, this has inflammatory oils and seed oils, and this has gums in it. And now all of a sudden we're looking at
Yes.
all this ingredient list, and are we really talking about? That's why I like that you said that broad term healthy, because
Yeah.
and also, if you come into the conversation saying, I know what to do, I'm always going to say, well, why aren't you doing it? Like, not in a nice way, right? Like, well, why
Yeah,
is it being
right.
done? Why are we having this conversation in the first place? And if you know
Hmm.
what to do, what is holding you back from actually applying it? And then that goes back to the stress component. That goes back to the overwhelm. That goes, we could even talk about like electromagnetic frequencies and people not sleeping, and then the toxins in our environment,
Yeah.
how that also is impacting our soils, and how what we're eating is transported from across the country before it even gets to our
Hmm.
grocery stores, but before it even gets to our mouths. So
Yeah.
I know that people oftentimes are trying to do the best that they can, but as far as like sometimes there will be those fallacies where people think they're doing the right things because we've created what I call like this conventional glaze. It's like all things that we see on the news and things that we see
Hmm.
in magazines, and it just becomes this, oh, well, now I'm taking all these supplements and I must be healthy. But again, if you're
Yeah.
looking at your own individual body, your own data, your needs as a person who is different than any other person. You have your own genetic material, you have your genetic makeup, you have your own lifestyle and habits, you have family dynamics, you have
Hmm.
traumas, you have things that maybe you experienced. And for me, I believe like in spirituality, like past lives, like past lives your soul has interacted. We can go on for that on a whole nother adventure with that, but like things that you are part of your traumatic trauma
Yeah, there's a lot of
history,
factors.
right? That can factor into how you approach
Hmm.
your lifestyle habits and how you also approach your mindset. Mindset is a huge piece I talk about with clients too. Again, I know what to do, but yet where's the
Yeah.
where's the
Well, and
gap?
I think a lot of it can go back to marketing too, right? Is that a lot of these mainstream big box food companies are very good at marketing. And,
Yes.
a lot of it is we can't really trust it. And I think we're seeing that now. Luckily, that's coming to light
Yes.
now is that
Yes.
like, marketing can be very deceptive. And it's important to, you know, do our best. And I mean, sometimes you can be doing your best and you just need a little help. And that's why we're here is to help and to serve. But, there's a lot of confusing rhetoric out there, and look to your professionals, find trusted providers to help you decipher that, because even if you're doing everything that you can, sometimes you just need a little help in figuring it out and really diving deeper into it. And that's why we both exist here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And really what's, again, I keep saying fueled our passion, but really has, because we
Yeah.
can see like even in my own experience and, um, working with other dietitians, and it's like, that's not the same way that I would practice. So that's not the recommendations that I might make, or even like the nutrition, like my own organization, the dietetic nutrition, like
Hmm.
they had been promoting all of these from a marketing standpoint, right? Like promoting all of
Yeah.
these, um, all of these products. And I'm like, no, I can't get on board with that. Like I'm no longer
Hmm.
associating myself with that. And like looking
Yeah.
to the innate wisdom, like Weston A. Price, like his
Hmm.
whole big philosophy is all about the oral hygiene, like the mouth,
Yeah.
how that is impacted by the diet, how that's impacted by the lifestyle. I know you and I've talked about
Absolutely.
Weston A. Price to, in great detail. And then also what was used in the mouth, amalgam fillings. Amalgam
Hmm.
fillings. Mercury was put into people's bodies. Like, how is that
Yeah.
our toxic load and our toxic burden, and how to safely remove those so that we don't develop Alzheimer's or, again, but that can happen, right? That can happen. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of looking at all those factors, not only from like really being able to what I call become awakened. If you can
Hmm.
become one of the awakened, if you can ask questions, if you can pivot from the conventional or like the messaging that just seems to just be inundated, from the government, from all these different agencies where it's like they're all preaching the same things. You can go from one
Yeah.
news site to news site, and you're like, it's the same thing, it's
Yeah.
the same thing, it's the same thing, right? If
Yeah.
you can sift through all of that noise, and you can
Hmm.
actually get back to connecting with, it kind of goes all around like how we treat our, Mother Nature, how we treat our bodies,
Hmm.
how we treat our soils, how the toxic burden, toxic load, can be lifted if we just all work
Hmm.
together. And that
Yeah.
in itself is just it's such a powerful way that we can start shifting the way we live. And if we can become all awakened from the mindset of even just like understanding one thing that's pivotal, one thing that's different from the conventional
Yeah.
messaging, then I think we are again going to be moving in a really positive direction. Like what's happening now, as you just mentioned,
Mhm.
with the changes that are happening right now in government and
Yeah.
presidency, like there's a lot of things that are happening in the nutrition world. And for me, this is extremely exciting because I now
Hmm.
see like all the things that I've been preaching and talking about for like 10
Yeah.
plus years are now finally become, I'm no longer looked at as this crazy person. Like now it's like, oh, okay, these food
Yeah.
guys and all this other stuff. And it's like, you know, you, you you hear from maybe other dietitians, and I'm sure you experience this too with other dentists, is
Yeah.
that, oh, just a little bit and it's not that big of a deal. And like, again, I feel like we're just like washed up as a whale on the beach shore, just like helpless because you're not actually looking at what is impacting us long term. A
Yeah.
little bit accumulates a little bit. And it's that
Hmm.
accumulation factor that ends up, really tipping the scale or like seeing everything, fall apart. So, I'm glad to see that a lot of those things are happening now. Sorry, I went on a tangent, but
Yeah.
those things are happening now where we're actually coming to fruition and we are
Yes.
moving in such a beautiful direction. So
Yeah.
pivoting back to like what we do and how we support our people, how can people find you, right? Your audiences, if you're not already following
Yeah.
Maggie on Instagram, she has a phenomenal page. She does. I was like, you must have lots
Thank
of
you.
social media people helping. She's like, no, it's only me. I'm like, what? So she
Well, I
is
do have help
hilarious.
now. I do have help now.
You have help
Yes.
now.
So it's over the last month, I do have to give credit to Jackie, who's been helping us out. She's been phenomenal and taking the load off of me. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah, I think, I want my my objective is to empower and educate. So, just be here to serve. That's really what I'm here to do, is just to serve. But yeah, our practice is in Algonquin. You can find us online on social media. And how do people find you, Ashley?
Yeah, so best way, so we're Move Fully Nourished on Instagram. We also have Move Fully Nourished Community on Facebook, and then of course movefullynourished.com. And if anybody's interested too, and just even having a conversation, filling out our initial forms, gaining more insight into what your body's experiencing, your ailments. I talked about that MSQ form, and being
Yeah.
able to see like where those deficiencies are showing up physically and what information is our body giving us that we need to look internally. And ultimately too in the mouth, whenever I see anybody filling that out and it comes up, I'm like, gotta gotta reach out and send them to Maggie because
Yes.
they definitely need to have, I mean, that saliva test in itself just sounds amazing. So I think even just as a
Yeah.
service check out, do you have
Mhm.
when people go to your website too, Maggie, where they can book an initial and that's the best way to get in touch with you or a call,
Yeah.
or what's
Yep.
the best way for
We
people to
we
find
have booking directly from our website, so you can book directly online, schedule a first appointment, or give
Awesome.
us a call. We'll be happy to help you out.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, sounds
Yes.
great. This has been so, so much fun. I think we need to
Yeah.
do it again. And for anybody who has made it to the very end here, please post your questions, anything that you want us to answer. I'm going to put this in my Facebook group too, and I know we'll kind of blast this
Awesome.
in different sections on social media as well. So
Love
thanks
it.
for joining us, and thanks so much for
Yes.
taking this call with me today, Maggie. It's so great to see you.
Thanks, Ashley. Always a pleasure.